Hello, Mike.
Hello, Jack.
Eh,
Great to be
Happy
back
Tuesday.
on another week. Happy Tuesday this time. Sooner or later, we'll
Mhm.
just we'll coincide. We'll be a daily. How's that? Is that what
Mm.
you've been
Oh,
hoping for?
that would be quite something. Yeah, we would take over the world. Yeah.
uh, I'm a huge fan of that author I sent you. His name is Matt. What is his name? Matt Levine. Writes for
Mhm.
Bloomberg, and he's economist, or he writes about economy, or I don't know what he actually is. But yes, he does a daily art post, and I'm always find it fascinating. I mean, he writes really well. I like the way he writes. It's fun to read. You get to learn about banking and all the pitfalls
Mhm.
of it, which I find amusing. So, he was talking today about uh, this interface design. Have you heard of this story about the interface design of Citigroup? So
No, I
apparently,
did not. Yeah.
Citigroup has this interface where if you're transferring money, apparently its default is $1 trillion,
Oh,
and you
that's a good
have
one.
and you have to delete all the zeros
Mm.
in order to transfer the money. And apparently, what happened, of course, is somebody forgot to delete the zeros and tried to transfer, a $10 trillion into somebody's account
Mhm.
when it was supposed to be $10. Anyway, it's amusing things like that about, especially when it comes to finance. I find, the comedy
No,
never ends.
well, maybe they thought that they had a greater role, for the society, like encouraging you to be more successful, right? I mean, strive for the trillions, because you can do it. You see, they are, within the arm's reach, and if they are showing up on your bank account, then maybe you are closer than you think. So I think there's a possible, deep social messaging that is very, very positive, I think. So yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. I mean, I have my world's greatest dad cup right here. So you see what I mean. We definitely want to be the best, right?
Yeah, yeah. And if they can make Elon, feel a little bit inadequate that he is not at that level yet, all the better. So yeah, that's even encouraging the best of us.
Well, as I said, on the operational side, where you and I both live, right, as just mere players rather than owner operators of this world, you know,
Or
I think
perhaps
it is
grab.
interesting. We talked about the
Yeah.
person to blame, but I think it's interesting when the interface is to blame, because I actually was trying to help my brother-in-law get a train ticket on the metro to go. To the next town
Mhm.
where he's going to get a ride.
Mhm.
And I literally had to pull my decades of UX knowledge in order to get through the purchase on the Metra app because they miscommunicated the flow, right? They had a very prominent next that was what you'd think you do, but actually that wasn't what you needed to do. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was just kind of reminding me, of all the intricacy behind some of these decisions. 18F, by the way, just
Yeah.
my friend used to work for them, and they all got canned. And what they were trying to do is to make government easier to use, so that you could fill out a form online or do, any sort of actual interactions with the government. You could do it through an interface. So yeah, I'm an interface designer. I find it fascinating, but I also think that the investment in that seems very low level. It just seems like, okay, somebody could buy a train ticket, but as we all know right now, it's like you don't have another option. There are no longer any ways to buy a train ticket except through using software. And
Mhm.
at the moment, I guess we could kind of turn this into our main topic, right, of AI. Um,
Mhm.
we don't, AI is optional, as far as I know, right? I mean, it's still new enough, and I don't think anyone truly understands it. So therefore, I don't think it's operational in most places. And I'm guessing in your experience, and please let me know, right? You're sort of at the forefront of being the department under the CIO that
Mhm.
is piloting things. Does that
Mhm.
sound right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and Yeah, so yeah, I totally agree with that ticket purchasing app. Yeah, I have the same feeling. I don't think I understand it.
Yeah.
And for me the problem is that I really don't know at what point I am buying the ticket and at what point I am using the ticket so that it's already invalid. So if I was going to show it to the conductor or whoever is checking it, is it still a valid ticket or is it already used? So I have to get a new one so that I am, kind of properly ticketed. So yeah, so I feel the same way. I mean, there's something wrong in the design which involves like two or three screens only. Like hey, here's where you want to go. Here's the time, and then okay, so you got the ticket, you paid for it. So now what, right? I mean, can I touch that button, and am I gonna have to buy it one more time? So yeah, so that's and I think that this I did some work in usability research for mobile devices, and
Hmm.
the outcome from this research for one of the papers was a usability model for a mobile application, and that was kind of like a different word. The HCI, the human computer interaction people, when they talk about the model, it's a different animal or different entity comparing to, let's say, machine learning people, where we are talking about a mathematical or a computational model. So a
Hmm.
usability model was something that was basically that had like a number of boxes, and one of the bugs might be called the clarity of the user interface, and another box will be maybe what's the cognitive load on kind of fulfilling a task, like how many times I have to click to, let's say, purchase a ticket or something, right? So there is a bunch of those boxes, and they are connected by arrows, right? And then you do a user study where you kind of do an observation or you do a survey or something like that, and you're kind of creating a like a weights that connect the boxes. And you will see that, oh, from that box to that box there is only like maybe zero point 0.7 connection, which means that there is like a strong feedback between those two boxes. So at the end of the day, right, you are able to have a good overview of what works, what doesn't, but it not necessarily gives you the predictive capability that in machine learning you have, where the model is strictly meant to be predictive.
Hmm.
Here in human computer interaction, that next step is not exactly obvious, because if you change one of the boxes, you have to go to the users and ask them, hey, that changed, do you like it, right? Is it helping you, or is it kind of, do you hate it, right? So HCI is kind of hard because the modeling is different, right? It's not predictive, it's kind of like a descriptive, maybe qualitative or quantitative, or the mix of those. So yeah, it's kind of always a hard problem.
Oh, 100%. And you bring up a ton of stuff I'm very passionate about, right? Like when there's something where there's a path, right? You what you kind of stated is maybe part of both of our fascinations is there's many paths toward a goal, but not in a
Mhm.
designed world. In fact, my favorite slide for this, right, is a path with a gate or something like that, and then there's usually a path around the gate, by feet, a trail to bypass the design, right? Because
Mhm.
most people want to bypass the design. And
Mhm.
with other people, that can be, that can have its pluses or minuses, right? I just
Mhm.
checked out at Costco, and I don't think we've ever really talked about the weird world of self checkout. You're right that is a world that had to be designed because it
Mhm.
isn't obvious how companies monetize selling things when it's something like the bulk of a grocery store.
Mhm.
They want to get through as many customers as possible, and there's all sorts of use cases. So I'm there, and I know that Costco is interesting because they have a great data model that they know the weight of everything. That's very interesting, right? That somehow the guardrails are that you put the thing on the scale, and if you
Mhm.
don't, it will not let you. That's its gate. Rather than
Mhm.
a person who would never need such a thing, right? They would just kind of be able to visually kind of count things on a conveyor belt. But what's odd about Costco is the problem that they have these things that are too big and and maybe even too heavy to actually physically put around. So then they have to have outlier people that come around and notice this and then scan it for you with this thing. So they've already, I mean, I think of that as being really sophisticated, right? That the human intervention comes in the things where it's really physically impossible. So what you just described literally happened to us, is that we didn't know if we used the ticket or not because somebody pushed the button. And I kept thinking, like, is that like, I don't have a mental model, right? I don't know. I know how a ticket works. You know, they could tear it or whatever. Remember those good old tickets, and they used to stick them on there or something, you know, like,
they can punch it here
or whatever, and you don't care. You know, this is the thing. You have no vested interest in how they make money, correct?
Yeah.
Which why maybe I'll just point out, and you know this as well, is when you go to Europe or some other places, like, you can just get on the train. You know, I mean, they don't guard you from getting into trains. The trains are going to go there whether you're on it or not. And so what we tended to find out is there's stops where you kind of have to get on another train to get to the main station, but there's not enough time to check everybody's ticket, and therefore it's really just nobody pays, you know, just because it's an inefficiency in the system, right? And there's just, you know, there's not enough time to have even those people who are supposed to be there just to be random checkers, because that's a big thing in Germany and in Portugal, where, you know, they just pick people randomly. If they don't have the right ticket, then it's a huge fine. So it's kind of this, it's a different model, right? In America, we tend to have barred iron gates, and if you can't get in, hopefully there's someone there to handle the exceptions. You know, there's somebody there to override, you know, when things don't work quite right. That seems to set us up for some analog to AI, right? Like, you know, if the computer could have different paths toward the same goal, which I think is what's great about AI, right? In fact, may I ask, I'm not positive about models, but I'm positive that you may have taken different scenarios and put them through different models. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, totally.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and therefore you have now sort of you can compare different ways. You know, it's kind of the same, right? But they're different. And to me, that's something very human, right? Like you will have some, I don't know if you have you have a measure like, oh, that's 3% and that's 4%. I mean, I doubt it, right? You're more like, well, that's pretty decent and that one seems off. Or you tell me.
yeah. So measure could be the time, right? It takes to complete the task, or the measure could be the satisfaction, right? Like, hey, you know, I'm terribly happy, right? So you can have like the Likert scale, you know, for some things, and you can have the time, or you can have the, you know, maybe the accuracy measurements that for some tasks. Yeah. So that is kind of a model, right? But if we are now transitioning to AI, right? Possibly the most sophisticated system that you know many people could think about, a large language model, has been wrapped into as simple interface as humanly possible, right? There's only one window at the bottom and the
Yep.
bigger window on top of the screen, and whatever you want you type in, and whatever comes out is just some text, maybe some image, maybe something kind of showing up, you know, on the side. But you see why our ticketing application couldn't be something that is as simple as let's say main screen for ChatGPT or some other systems where, you know, basically, okay, you're just gonna type, you know, you wanna go to Chicago, right? And then the system will display, here's the ticket, right? Here's the price. You know, do you want to buy it? You know, you click on it, and there you go, right? And the ticket maybe will appear on the screen, or will be emailed to you or something like that. So apparently the the OpenAI interface. I think it was first out there, or maybe maybe it's grossly, injustice. Maybe Eliza was the first one, and they just took it, right? so so yeah, so I think
Agreed.
that this could be a better system. And now we chatted a little bit, before this meeting, that hey, and that there's the other world, which is the world of gaming, right? And let's say,
Hmm.
for example, the game of StarCraft, right, which is one of the most complex strategy games that are out there, or maybe World of Warcraft, similar, right, where you have extremely complex interface that also works, right? It works as well for
Okay.
the people who play the game as the simple text at the bottom, text window at the bottom, text window on top. But somehow the ticketing application is something that is kind of beyond the control of many people who want to implement something like that. So it's an interesting world that we can dive into if you wish.
I do wish. I mean, both of us, and I think one thing that inspires me, right, is the concept of choose your own adventure. That's kind of like been the theme of probably my all my fascination with computing, right? Is that you yourself can go through some experience and you can make it your own because the designers or whatever allowed you some freedom, right? And gaming is a really good example. Is that the levels of freedom have multiplied to StarCraft level because I guess you could start with Pong. So at the same
Mm,
time as Pong, there was a text adventure, right? One being, I think, the most sophisticated still experience you could have because it was using words instead of graphics. The graphics were very primitive and words were manageable. And then it had a
mm,
parser that it could vaguely understand language, which was still amazing too, right? And I think all this was written in Fortran, if that means anything. But so it was still this idea that, it was not the most sophisticated tools, but yet you could build something that gave the illusion of sophistication, that it not only
mm,
understood you, but it rewarded you, and it actually had a task of adventuring, right? That gave you a lot of fun and spent so many joyful hours, right? uh in this sort of and then it actually became books, which were less fun but were still popular, right? Where you'd okay, turn to page 37, right? And when you had those books, you sort of the reveal was there, right? This is finite, it doesn't react to everything, you might have more multiple choice than open-ended word questions. And the open-endedness to me was what was thrilling, And when you
mm,
went to go to Pong, you needed an opponent, I guess, right? Because
mm,
this was a one-person adventure. And I think I spoke to you about my affection and admiration, awe over the world of the witness, which is a world where you also have a lot of open-endedness. Like there's nothing really that you need to do. You have to explore, you get rewards for exploring. But what makes the game unique is that the system by which it's working with is completely designed. Like there is literally no randomness in this world. It's all been done purposefully. So when you get to some other games like Warcraft, like roguelike, I think they call it, is where you have a pattern underneath it. So whenever I play
mm,
those games, I'm afraid that I don't because underneath it I just see like you're just have a bunch of numbers. They're all in there somewhere, and by picking the bloodthorn blurg axe, you might get some different animation styles, but you still are just changing a number in the machine that then governs whatever. And
mm,
in a way, I find that unsatisfying, right? I want a
mm,
narrative change. I want to say, hey, once you have reached um, Zen status, that somehow your opponents now challenge you in some intellectual way or something. You know what I mean? Like the challenge has to build not numerically, but it kind of builds to different challenges to you personally. Does this have
mm,
any resonance, right? And I do think that The Witness as a game is designed that way. The growth is that you have to grow in order to
mm,
understand the game. The game does not change at all. It's just that underneath it is revealing this sort of thing that you yourself have to change the way you think in order to understand it. And I'm sure that's maybe a high level for a game, right? Instead of it just being like taking a test is a game. I mean, you and I both, right? Haven't you been in a test where you just fill in the stuff randomly? You know what I mean? Like, and what's going to happen? Well, you know, you're probably going to get a 50%, you know, I guess, right? Like you could get them all wrong, you could get them all right, but most likely you're going to just kind of suck, right?
Mhm.
In general. But it's still fun to do, right? Because there is that feeling. It's like I don't let's make it as big of a conversation as possible. Gambling is now really, really popular, right?
Mhm.
Online gambling is that exact feeling that somehow you got it figured out, right? That you're gonna roll the literally roll the dice and have a better outcome than somebody else would because you obviously know everyone knows that everybody can't win unless it's a Ponzi scheme because then that's a different game. Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right, but I threw a lot out because I still think it's these qualitative games. Can
Mhm.
AI help us build qualitative gaming? You see what I mean? Because the other
Mhm.
kind of games are just based on, I mean, I guess I go back to chess or Go, right? Those are pretty qualitative games. They are numeric, but they do kind of have all sorts of weights to them, right? And they have patterns to them that are kind of profound. A lot of people find a lot of profundity
Mhm.
in chess and Go, right?
Mhm.
Whereas they might
Yeah.
not find it in StarCraft. But you tell me. Tell me what you think. Does any of that resonate?
Well, yeah. So there's a lot of kind of great things that are happening in many of those games. So coming back to our concept of a train ticket as a concept, right? You have to do something with it, right? Like you have to acquire it, you have to kind of have it available, and then it has to be maybe kind of used, like shown to the conductor or kind of like utilized somehow, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so in a good game like StarCraft or World of Warcraft that is well designed, you have maybe hundreds of items like that, right? Like the concept of a train ticket occurs like you are managing a great number of those that you have to acquire those concepts and you have to use them and you have to kind of manage somehow, right? So this
Mm-hmm.
this this concept here is kind of very interesting because to me, then okay, so all right, so if I want to grow, right, if I want to use the resources maybe better, I have to maybe I can discover new places in the game, right? So that growth, and I totally agree with you, has to occur. But for the growth to occur, I have to be willing to continue playing, right? Like
Sure.
it's that path might be out there, right? So maybe it's a text game, and I don't want to look at text. So I'm not going to play, even though this is a very easy path for growth for me. So this concept now kind of becomes a little bit more nuanced because we know what is a good game. It could be educational, it could be kind of something growth related, but we kind of know what a good game might be. But some people will choose to play, some people will choose not to play, right? And conversely, there is also going to be games like Mortal Kombat, for example, where maybe there is no growth. Absolutely, you're just gonna kind of enjoy the bloodbath, and there is no growth in there, but there is something that makes you come back to that game. And maybe it doesn't have to be violence only, but maybe there's something else, and that something else is very difficult to pinpoint. So I'm hoping that the AI can be one of those things where we will be using AI not only as a kind of like running NPCs, non-player characters within the game, make them really engaging, but maybe kind of come up with game designs so that they will be resonating and we will be playing those games to maybe to work, maybe to learn, maybe something that is going to be like maybe replacing the traditional teacher-student relationship. I don't know, but this kind of resonates quite a bit with me.
Well, I mean, you kind of brought it up right there, or maybe this idea of the $1 trillion default
Mm.
in the interface isn't a and did we say that off camera or on? Anyway, whatever. The idea that the interface is going to nudge you in a particular
Mm.
way. And there's
Mm.
my passion for design. And if it is just a box, I think that's another problem because I think people are now equating AI as sort of being like Google, and they get
Mm.
worked up over the answers it gives. And I was like, it's not an answer, it shouldn't be an answering machine. And I will say, and you can criticize me, which I should be probably, is like I keep moving from model to model, right? Like I'll go LM to me, Notebook LM works for something I think well. And then
Mm.
was over in Claude for a while, which I thought worked really well for some things. And then and then I like the voice part of Chat GPT. So I like that in certain situations. And so I'm a weird, maybe I'm not expressing this well, but you don't say, oh, well, this is really a job for Fortran. I better learn that
Mm.
language. Oh no,
Mm.
I think I need to actually learn .NET, because hey,
Mm.
it was good at this. I mean, right? Nobody thinks like that, do they? Although it's probably
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, and maybe the ultimate design is going to be something like totally different. Maybe the ultimate design is going to be the HAL 9000 design, where there is no interface. You don't even look at the screen. You just have that voice that has a lot of authority to it, or maybe it's sinister, or there is going to be some sort of a hook that will kind of make you to interact with that voice. And maybe it's super intelligence that is going to be there, right? And maybe it's going to be so good that it's going to kind of solve your problems, and you will know that it's solving your problems. So yeah, that could be it, right? So if we are talking about the design, right, system design, and whether it's supposed to be a game, right? Maybe it's a game that is going to be a conversation with a super intelligence that is maybe just around the corner.
Well, you bring up another fascinating thing to me is that most people playing a game, it's really just more obstacle oriented, right? Or
Mm.
it's thematic in some way that says if you have a certain amount of time to kill here, this is a way to be challenging yet not taxing. What the most popular game in the world? What, Tetris? I guess. Here it is. It's not educational though, as far as I
Mm.
can imagine. Right? It is more about some level of challenge, but not enough to cause a lot of stress, I guess, that it's actually, or I don't know StarCraft, or I don't know Fortnite, but perhaps, these are endorphin things, right? Like, oh, or I know
Mm.
Elden Ring is like that, right? Apparently you just try to bash the crap out of something until it dies, and then it's triumphant because you finally
Mm.
have, you know, managed to do something, right? Or proceed
Mm.
opposite in a way of the design of the witness, which has no obstacles other than your own thinking about it is the
Mm.
obstacle, actually. Or learning is the obstacle. So I think of it as an actual educational game.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's rare. That's all. I'm just saying, I think this is the rarest model and design, but my whole focus now is, can you make that game? We talked about it last week and the week before. It's like, can you make something that's educational into a game? Is there any way to gamify work? Um, uh, but I think I got away from my. You made the best point, right? Which is that it's the emotion behind it is
Mm.
the actual goal. This is where I think we have to kind of separate out. We make decisions, people, us, you, me, even if it's meaningless, right?
Mm.
Based on an emotion, that completest emotion. I finally got this score in Tetris.
Yeah.
And those are very
Mm.
artificial, obviously, and they're very numeric, but they're still achievements because you can quantify, you can quantify your effort. Your effort was great. In
Yeah, yeah.
work, if I could answer five more or two and one more email a day, let's just pretend that my job had something to do with that, right? Or if I could
Mm.
design two more screens a day, we talked about this productivity thing. Is
Mm.
that actually better than, oh, I'm playing a game where the goal is to be better at my skill set, which
Yeah.
actually is what work should be, right? Like you should sort of become better at something, right? You might become a
Yeah.
more aware or have different, they're literally the person with the $12 trillion thing was just a worker, right? They just kind of made a mistake, is really what happened. And of course, terrible interface design. But guess what? There was supposed to be someone who there
Mm.
was to notice that they made a mistake.
Mm.
So let's not unpack bosses yet, which they didn't notice, right? So
Mm.
it actually went through, and it was the receivers that got flagged because they're like, wait a second, you can't be transferring trillions of dollars or whatever. So the ridiculousness of the transaction was masked by the
Mm.
computer, and I still think there is no world will ever exist in where AI can understand emotional decision making, right? Like it isn't something that comes from it, you know what I mean? Because emotional decision making is about fear of loss and all these, there's a million psychological things, or envy, or peer pressure. Anyway, there's a million reasons to push you into a decision. I love AI because I just like reading stuff and I have no decisions to make. I'm just browsing, but a game has to have stakes. You
Mm.
see what I mean? Like there has to be risk, there has to be reward. And that's where I'm struggling. Does that make any sense?
Well, yeah, and that's where I sometimes disagree with you about the emotional stuff, right? Like I remember there is a scene in Terminator 2 where the kid is asking Arnold Schwarzenegger whether he feels pain, right? And the answer that the Terminator had was that I have the data about the damage to my body. You can consider this data to be pain, right?
Okay.
So yeah. So if we kind of apply the same metric here, I mean, yeah, it's true that they will, the microprocessor will never feel truly pain, but what does it really mean? Well, you can kind of model pain, right? You can model emotion. You can program very accurately. There's a lot of literature that in psychology and psychiatry and all those sciences that will define like what kind of are the reasons and what are the magnitudes of pain that people might feel, psychologically, physically. All that stuff can be modeled. So if let's say you burn your finger, with hot coffee, chances are that you can model that very well, and you know exactly how long the pain you will feel. So so the computer might have exactly the same reaction if this is a robot or something like that. So yeah, so I kind of I
Hmm.
kind of I kind of agree with you that emotion is key, right? And while the microprocessors will not be truly emotional pieces of silicon, I think they can model very, very accurately the emotions that people feel when gambling, where people feel if they are winning, let's say, a strategy game or losing a strategy game, or when they are seeing a screen that is maybe evoking some emotions of fear, or applies to
Yeah, yeah.
visuals, to applies to music. So I think at the end of the day, that's why I have a lot of hope in AI applied to gaming, that we might be able to put together something that is integrating much better all those small pieces that we should probably know already.
Well, let's unpack it a little, because here's why I make that argument. It isn't that it can't model it, but now you mentioned that there's AI has been able to train itself to be the best StarCraft player,
Hmm.
right? Like it can win.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And because that is a complicated thing, and I'm certain the designers try to build it so you really can't be that good at it, right? But they must
Hmm.
design it, and this is the thing about design, right? Is that for me buying the ticket, they should know that There might be just somebody who's brand new to this, who's never bought a ticket before, and they might need a simpler interface than
Yeah.
somebody who has been using this for years, right? And
Mhm.
completely understands the zones. And you see what I mean? Like
Mhm.
if you're a native, you're going to need a different interface. And guess what? We don't build two interfaces. I don't know why, but
Mhm.
or actually really good companies probably do. So I would assume if you start as a Uber driver, you might get a different interface, right,
Mhm.
about how Uber works or how to decide whether or not to pick somebody up. But as you grow more confident or comfortable with it, that those guides go away. And that to me is
Mhm.
education, right? Like we want to give you, right, a good start so that you begin to build your confidence. And that's why they call it onboarding or whatever they do at work, right? But those systems go away. In fact, sometimes they go
Mhm.
away way too quick, right? Like, hey, your first 2 weeks you'll have a mentor, but then after that you're on your own. I've had that at
Yeah.
work, right? So we don't have that ever constant companion. But on the flip side, just to mess with you because that's what I like to do. Um,
Mhm.
on the flip side, I would love to experiment with a AI interface that doesn't tell you stuff. You have to talk it in to helping you. You have to make it worth its while. See what I mean?
Mhm.
Because this is the problem, is that we don't get a lot of social skills, and especially me, who loves to just spend his time, you know, in front of computers and Hal, right? Because we
Mhm.
expect Hal to be our servant and do whatever we ask Hal to do, right? And what
Mhm.
we do when we get out in the real world is we piss everybody off because we're not playing the right game. We're not being open or complimentary or coaxing people into helping or engaging with us, which is what people like. You see what I mean? And that's
Mhm.
the crux of a lot of problems, that people might need help, actually. And I have this as my note for you, Jack. You need to build this. So if you were to converse with an AI that could have a face,
Mhm.
as you talk to it, it could use facial expression to train you to not say certain things. Yet it would be a safe space, meaning you could make mistakes. You could, try things out. You could be experimental, but it could, how when you get that look, I see the look right on your face now, like, shut up, Michael. You just gotta, can it, and that's important, right? That's critical. So when you have AI now being trained to be, again, overly complimentary and overly helpful, you're also training people in a I'd say an incorrect way, because it doesn't have to do that. And education tends not to be about instant gratification, I hope. Did any of that challenge? No, is that just Michael being argumentative?
Well, yeah. So I think yeah. So there's again, so many things to unpack. I on one level, um, the expressions, the faces, and maybe on a very simple level, in the early Mario games, right? People were identifying with Super Mario because maybe the 32 matrix 32 pixel by 32 by 32 pixel matrix was not changing too much. But if Mario was doing well in the game, it was a music that was kind of uplifting. If
Hmm.
Mario was in trouble, there was these sounds effects that kind of were kind of make you kind of feel sorry for Mario and kind of trying to help it, right? So these kind of this multimodal messaging kind of can be done. Yeah. So I agree with you. Maybe there should be more of this in kind of gaming that is educational, right? Maybe it's going to be the music that
Oh,
we
I
will
say
love,
it's
right?
essential. I mean,
Yeah,
it won't work without it. Do you
yeah,
agree?
yeah. I mean, you can make an argument that if you watch Star Wars, that people absolutely loved, and you take away the John Williams music, I think it would be a huge flop, right?
Oh, it would be incomprehensible is the
Yeah,
problem, right?
yeah. So you can make the same argument about a lot of other kind of pieces of art where there is a combination of visuals and audio and video and the narrative and the story and often maybe the story was not the most important thing. Maybe it was the turbocharge or the boost from the other things that kind of made it so uplifting, right? I mean, you could Lord of the Rings, it was a wonderful story, a wonderful book. The Dune, but look at the Dune story, right? Not worse than Lord of the Rings, but there was so many attempts to actually visualize that story, and they failed so many times that it took like several decades to come up with something that is still not as good, in my opinion, as the book, but it's a successful visualization. So yeah, so you are right. I mean, it's a confluence of things, and I think the AI can now see those patterns
Oh, yeah.
without understanding, right? Without
Right,
understanding. Yeah,
right.
I,
It
I
doesn't,
got it.
again, it doesn't
But
need to know, but
yeah,
it can understand, like you mentioned,
yeah,
it can model
mm,
frustration. So I would
yeah,
think here's even better. Like, let's get a PhD on this one. What if you're a
mm,
coder, which you are, right? And you're sitting in
mm,
there and you write your little bit of code and you go to compile, or you know how you do that thing, right? And instead, it goes through the AI. The AI decides that you don't really understand how to code very well. So it's not going to compile it. And it comes back and
mm,
said, you know what? I think you should try that again. And you would be
mm,
there like, you know what I mean? You would be like, how? You'd be like, wait a second, I'm the one in charge. You
mm,
aren't supposed to have any motivation other than to go through your compiling thing, whatever that is, right? Much like the game.
mm,
The game is there sort of playing itself whether you're playing it or not, right? It doesn't have any um there's no advantage for it without at all. It doesn't actually has no agenda whatsoever, right? It's a fake thing, but it can be educational because it has all these parameters that people get really engaged in, right? And if you play other games, I think it's great how I played Red Dead. Have you ever played Red Dead Redemption? Or you've heard of it probably. You know
yeah,
that
yeah, further. Mhm,
so it's a game where I guess you can go in and just shoot people, right? That seems
mm,
popular. But you could also go
mhm,
in there and look. I think you could spend 50, 100 hours looking for orchids. Like there is a
mm,
sub game I got, right? And I know it's there because they sooner or
mm,
later tell you about it, where you can just go orchid hunting. And I think there's something really that's what I'm fascinated with, right? The game is letting you choose your own adventure. In one
mm,
sense, the game could let you use this environment to hide and jump out and shoot people or whatever that is. And that does move the story along, but the quest for the orchids and finding orchids is actually, can be quite pleasurable too to many, or I guess. But I don't know. What do you that this is the point of either you make a game that's so complicated and multifaceted, which seems like what AIs are now, right? They're
mm,
weird world in a box things. Isn't that about right? Like, I mean, that doesn't seem very clever, but I guess it's true because language is so malleable as
mm.
you can tell baby stories with it, or you can write War and Peace, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
have it's a robust enough tool, but it doesn't have any intrinsic purpose, right? Like we didn't invent math just to keep track of inventories, although certainly that was one of the uses.
Mm,
Sooner or later, we used it to, do whatever AI does, you know, and right? Like that
mm,
wasn't ever part of this language, but this language supported it. Am I making any
mm.
sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. That kind of reminds me of the first Blade Runner movie, right? Where the movie starts with an interrogation of the lower level robot, lower level Nexus that was supposed to be
Yeah.
just, like a military, like gun loading, right? And it's asking the guy is asking the robot, hey, what's a tortoise or whatever, you're not helping, right? And the robot didn't know what it was, right? So is it a turtle? Yeah, the same thing, right? So kind of
Uh-huh.
like a really low level interaction, kind of really not inspiring at all, right? But the movie ends with a poetic death Rutger Hauer's character, right? Which kind of holds this dove, right, and it has a poetic kind of like it's time to die, it's kind of really kind of like a totally different level of intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so you can kind of grow the interact. I think we have the AI now where both characters can be actually implemented, right? You can have something incredibly kind of basic that you can interact with at maybe at the beginning of the interaction, right? And then you can grow towards the poetic, extremely intelligent, Nexus 6, top of the line, intellect, right? And then kind of have everything in between that is going, right? So whether it's real or not, fake or not, whether they have really the feelings, who cares, right? It's your perception, your feelings that can be manipulated into kind of like believing those characters, right? At the end of the day, those were just robots, right? Did they really feel, the kind of they had the fear of death, right? They were able to kind of see through human intentions, right? But at the end of the day, they were just sophisticated AI systems, right? I mean, maybe biological, right? But still AI, right? So
Yeah.
this is kind of getting us maybe towards the kind of like kind of a conclusion, right? Like there's certainly a lot of things, for people like you and I, that there's possible, right? There's possibilities now, right? You don't have to spend a year to program a single answer to a question, about the material of your class. Now you can kind of start building those sophisticated systems, and maybe it will take you a year, but it's very doable. It's kind of within our grasp.
Yeah, and just as an example, in determining, getting started with this idea of a curriculum, because I think it's fun. Like, what do you have people do? How do you learn things? That's one of the funs of teaching, right? Is you're kind of coming up with either read this and write this, or you're looking for some way to engage somebody in a topic, and I think games are a great way to engage people. That's all. I think there's no reason things can't be fun. So in the concept of working with GPT, I was talking about this course in qualitative data analysis, right? So here's this thing of, yeah, I've been in this world. We have surveys and just the things you were talking about. People go to a movie theater and they give you a bunch of questions, and I've been in this world before. Or evaluate your professors. That's a huge one for me because I designed that system at DePaul, right? To see what people did, and you start to learn, the brittleness of this numeric stuff, right? Yet it's very easy to trend. It's easy to work with. It's sort of it's the falsity of this whole thing. Is like the things that's easy to work with, we work with a lot. The stuff that's actually important, we don't work with because it's hard to work with. Does that make sense? Like the qualitative
Yeah.
stuff, it's hard to visualize. It's a little hard to communicate, and that's why people with talents like myself of trying to communicate things visually had fun because we like that, right? I make artwork, I mean, it's about an idea, but it certainly doesn't use words to communicate that idea, I hope, right? It's about
Yeah.
getting something across and getting people emotionally engaged. And I find, one person could look at my work and they'd find it very sad, and another would find it amusing, and that would, to me, would be, I'd be happy. You see what I mean? So I would never make art and do a survey. Do you see what I mean? Because I want both of them to happen. See what I mean? Whereas if you're doing a product or you're selling something, you sort of aim toward a really blunt goal. I just want you to buy it, which is a terrible goal. Actually, I want you to like it, right? I want you to trust it, and I want you to enjoy it. Those are all emotions. You see what I mean? So if we're not understanding those things, how could we use, like you said, here's this thing that can understand these very hard concepts. So the first thing I said is, hey, what would be the first exercise? How would you understand qualitative data analysis? And the first thing that came to my head was two truths and a lie. You ever heard of this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so as a first off the bat, I was thrilled with this because I remembered it, and then I told GPT, and it's like, oh yeah, two truths and a lie would teach you, right? It teaches you something really important if you did it usually it's just an icebreaker, right? It's supposed to be
Yeah,
a way
that's a
to be
great idea. Yeah.
memorable, but it actually can be analyzed and understood as a technique. So you see what I mean? To understand what is qualitative data analysis about. It's about well, a lot, and then it went through many, many more games that you can play, which weirdly enough are really perfectly suited to qualitative data analysis. You know, there's a lot of games are, in a sense, playing with trying to understand what's real and what's fake, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, I think it'd be a fun course. More to come.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like another topic for our next meeting.
Maybe. I hope so. As always. Yeah. So until then, Jack, thank you for humoring me and being one of the few humans that won't just tell me what I want to hear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My pleasure. I think this was a good topic. I mean, I think there's a lot of kind of important things. I mean, the
I think
design
so
is
too.
important.
I think it's great to sort of not feel as though we're behind. I just think this is where it's going to go. But yeah, it's well
Mm.
worth discussing.
Yeah,
And thank you again for your perspective.
yeah.
See you
Thank you,
next
Matt.
time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. See you next time.